Hello and welcome back to the Purposeful Shift. I'm Emma Bryant and I am really glad that you are here with me today. Over the last few episodes, we've been exploring ideas around courage and identity and what it means to choose a path that feels truly right for you, even if that path looks very different to the people around you. And today I want to build on that conversation by talking about something that I think almost all of us probably experience, even if we don't tend to talk about it openly. And that is comparison. It's this quiet habit that we seem to have of measuring ourselves and our lives against other people and other people's lives. So we look at their successes, their relationships, their confidence. We might look at their creativity, their homes, their careers, their bodies, their opportunities, and their progress. And I think often without even realizing it, we might be using those comparisons to decide whether we are doing well enough ourselves. And this week, I found myself doing just that thing. So this week, I decided to finally launch the very first Purposeful Shift retreat, which will take place in Bristol in November. It's something that I have been thinking about for months. Running retreats is an absolute dream of mine. It's something that I've been wanting to do for years. And so I've been starting to plan behind the scenes. I've been refining and I've been doubting myself. I've been changing my mind about what the format should be and if it's going to tick all of the right boxes. I've been wondering whether anybody would even attend, wondering whether I was ready to do a retreat. And then eventually I reached a point where I knew I just needed to put it out there into the world and treat it as an experiment and just see what happened. Before I'd even pressed publish on the Eventbrite page, I found myself starting to look at other similar events. So I think I probably told myself that I was undertaking market research, that it was a necessary and important thing to do to make sure that my event was going to hit the mark. But in doing so, of course, I looked at other coaches. I looked at other women who were offering retreats and I was looking for evidence. I was questioning how many people had booked onto their retreats. How much were they charging? How polished was their marketing? And how many followers did they have on socials? How quickly had they sold out their tickets? And within literally a matter of minutes, I had gone from feeling really excited about creating something that I really care about, that's meaningful to me, that aligns with my values and that resonates with my audience, to totally questioning whether I should be doing any retreat at all, if I was appropriately qualified, if it was too soon, if people would get enough value from the day, if the venue would be good enough, you name it. I started doubting myself and wondering about it. And I think this is exactly what comparison can do. It can take something that feels really exciting and full of possibility and suddenly turn it into some kind of measuring stick, and one that often doesn't work in our favor. So today I wanted to ask you, have you ever looked at somebody else's life and felt like you were somehow behind? Maybe you've seen somebody launching a business or publishing a book or buying a house or traveling the world or getting promoted or finding love, getting married, getting fit, growing a following on socials, or just doing something that you secretly perhaps wish you were doing yourself. And for a moment, even if it's just a fleeting moment, you found yourself wondering, what are you doing wrong? Or perhaps, why are you not there yet? So Theodore Roosevelt is often credited with saying that comparison is the thief of joy. And you've probably heard that saying or that quote because it's a quote that gets shared a lot. And I was thinking about this. I think it's simple and it's quite profound, but I think comparison is a little bit more complicated than that. We don't compare ourselves to others because we are weak or because we're failing. And I think it's a very human thing to do. And so I don't think it's a question of whether we compare ourselves to other people or not, but more a question of what we do or what happens when we do compare ourselves to others. Because I don't think it needs to just be about stealing joy. I think comparison can also leave us feeling really inspired. Comparison can help us learn and it can show us what's possible, but it can also leave us feeling inadequate or stuck or frustrated or convinced that everybody else has their life figured out. And perhaps it can leave us thinking that maybe we don't. So I want to explore why we compare ourselves to other people in the first place, why even confident, self-aware people compare themselves to others, and why comparison might be more profound or challenging in periods of uncertainty or change, and how we can understand what comparison is actually trying to tell us and how it can be helpful. So one theory around comparison comes from a psychologist called Leon Festinger. In the 1950s, Festinger developed something called social comparison theory. His idea was simple, that humans naturally evaluate themselves by comparing themselves to other people. We compare our abilities, we compare our achievements, we compare our appearance, we compare our relationships, we compare our careers and our progress. And we do this because we are trying to understand where we fit in. As humans, we evolved in tribes and in social groups where belonging mattered enormously to us. Being accepted by the group, it meant safety and survival and protection. So our brains became incredibly sensitive to social positioning. In the past, you might say that comparison, therefore, isn't a character flaw, but it's actually a survival mechanism. The difference now is that we no longer are comparing ourselves to small groups of people in one village or one community. We are comparing ourselves to literally hundreds or thousands of people every single day through the digital world or through social media. And I'm not sure that we can manage that level of constant comparison every single day. So looking back, I can see comparison showing up literally at almost every stage of my life. As a business owner, as a marketer, as someone who is now studying for a master's degree in creative practice, as a new podcaster, and now as someone who is planning an in-person women's retreat later in the year. The details change, but the pattern is the same. I look around and I think that everybody else around me who's doing something similar seems to be moving faster or achieving more or doing things better than I am. And I suspect that many people have their own version of that story with different circumstances, I expect, but perhaps the same underlying feeling that comparison to others leaves us feeling inadequate and that we're not doing enough. I think comparison often shows up when we are in periods of uncertainty or change, perhaps when we are in a period of transition or we are questioning something, maybe the direction that we're taking in our lives, or when we are growing or when we are even considering change, when we're trying something new, or when we feel disconnected from ourselves. Because that uncertainty will naturally make us look outside of ourselves when we're not sure where we are going. It's tempting and natural for us to look around ourselves and see what everybody else is doing and to take inspiration from them. And if we aren't able to trust our internal compass, then we might start looking to external sources for direction. So we might start to seek advice in some ways from other people's experiences or directly from them and what they have achieved in their lifetimes. So if we're experiencing something for the very first time or in a different context, it's totally reasonable that we might want assurances. Perhaps we are changing career and we want some advice from somebody who's already doing that thing. Perhaps we're starting a business or we're leaving a relationship or we're entering a new relationship. Perhaps we're approaching retirement or we're navigating motherhood for the first time. Maybe we're moving house or we're starting a creative project or we're simply just trying to figure out what comes next. All of those unknowns will make us feel like we want some assurances from people outside of our own internal compass. And it's quite natural for us then to look and to see what seems to be working for other people who are navigating similar situations. If you've never been retired before, you're naturally going to look at other people who are already retired and see how their life is different as a retiree compared to your life as somebody who's coming up to retirement age. When we don't fully trust our own direction, though, we might start measuring ourselves against other people's success or perceived success or the things that they're doing or saying. And then that can cause us to actually lose sight of what is meaningful for us. And I think I've certainly felt that way recently. So as I've mentioned before, I've started this master's degree. It's an MA in creative practice. And what that means is that I am constantly surrounded by incredibly talented people. So on our course, there are artists, there's writers, there's poets, there's performers. There's people who are creating the most extraordinary work that I could literally only dream of being able to produce. And there are moments when I look at what my fellow students are producing, and I wonder whether what I'm creating even comes close to measuring up to their work. So I think things like, how easy is a podcast compared to being a skilled artist who creates a painting or a drawing? How easy is it for me to talk into a microphone with prompts on my screen compared to standing up and performing in front of a live audience and having to remember thousands of words and a full script? And I have to stop and have a word with myself, because creativity isn't supposed to be a competition. The purpose of creativity isn't to win or to outperform somebody else. It's not to be the best at something, but to express something that is uniquely yours. And maybe the words aren't unique, but the delivery is. And maybe the subject matter isn't unique, but the experiences and the context that you add to that situation are unique. So being able to tell my story in relation to what feels meaningful to me is me being creative. And it's where we have to trust ourselves that our creativity is important, that it deserves space. And if we can't trust ourselves and we are relying on somebody else's path and somebody else's experience or the actions that they've taken previously, then there's a danger that their evidence, their path, their experience starts to highlight our perception of our shortcomings. So psychologists often talk about two different forms of comparison. They talk about something called upward comparison and downward comparison. An upward comparison is when we compare ourselves to someone we perceive as being ahead of us in some way. So perhaps they seem more successful to us, or they seem to be more confident, or they seem more experienced, or they seem more accomplished. Sometimes that upward comparison can be quite motivating. It can inspire us, it can show us what's possible, and it can help us think, well, maybe if they can do it, maybe I can too. But it can also have a negative effect, because sometimes we don't leave that moment of comparison feeling inspired. Sometimes we leave feeling inadequate, and we focus on the gap between where we are and where they appear to be. And suddenly their success feels like evidence that we're failing, when in reality, both things can exist at the same time. Somebody else can be succeeding and you can still be exactly where you need to be. One of the things I think that comparison steals from us most often isn't actually joy, it's perspective. Because comparison encourages us to compare things that aren't comparable. So we might compare our beginning to somebody else's middle, or our chapter 3 to somebody else's chapter 20, or our year 1 to their year 5. We compare our behind the scenes reality with somebody else's highlight reel, the best bits, the only bits that they want us to see. And in doing so, we're being so cruel to ourselves. And I am definitely guilty of doing this. I've been doing this for years, probably my whole life. So from being a competitive swimmer and wondering how somebody else is swimming faster than me or training harder than I am, to coaches who I aspire to be like now, who are earning 6-7 figures and attending masterminds with people who I perceive to be global superstars. I find it a very easy trap to fall into. Podcasting has helped me to reflect on this quite a lot recently, because there are podcasts with much, much larger audiences than mine, obviously. They have bigger guests, they have professional studios, they have teams of people working behind the scenes to produce what they create and put out every week. And I can't remember how many staff Stephen Bartlett said he employed for Diary of a CEO and his kind of media company that produces the volume of content they produce each week. But I have a feeling it was around 100, and apologies, that could be wrong. But it was a large number of staff who are helping Stephen prepare. They're producing his podcast and the related content each week. And then I think, I mean, I know he's several years on and he's super successful. And that's like comparing his year 10 to my year 1. I'm 3.5 months in, and my podcast is just me. It's me talking to you now and then using some editing tools to produce something which I hope is good enough to listen to. These big successful podcasts have more downloads or streams than I can imagine. They have subscribers, they have sponsors, they have income. I don't have any of those things, but I'm still in the really early stages. And if I focus on those things that they have and everything that they've achieved and that huge gap between where I am and where they are, I could very quickly convince myself that what I'm building and my podcast isn't enough. Maybe it's not even worth the amount of time that I put into it each week. But then I will receive a message from a listener, somebody who tells me that an episode arrived for them at exactly the right moment, or that a conversation that I had with a guest helped them think differently about their life and what was possible for them, or that after they'd completed one of the reflection exercises, it's helped them to address something that perhaps they've been battling with or they hadn't come to realize was actually having quite a big impact on their lives. And then I'm reminded that success for me isn't about size and numbers. It's not about being a 6 or 7 figure entrepreneur. It's about impact. And if each podcast episode helps just one woman, then that's enough. That's the point. That's why I do this thing. And so I guess my point from this is, what measures are you using? And are you using measures that serve you, or are you using the wrong measuring tools for what it is that you're doing? When we compare with people who are not on a par with us, we are being so totally unfair to ourselves. Yet often we will wonder why we feel discouraged afterwards. And I think it's so easy for us to forget, like Stephen Bartlett, he started out on his own, doing his thing, sharing his diary. He started somewhere too. He started at the beginning. I'm sure he had his own fears, his own doubts, his own setbacks along the way. And I'm sure over the years, he has faced multiple times where he's felt uncertain. So we see the finished painting. We see the thing that other people want us to see. We don't see the hundreds of brushstrokes that came before that painting was finished, or the practice runs. We don't see the versions of that painting which were maybe painted over or were thrown away. We see the successful business, not the years of mistakes or the failures or the money lost or the HR issues that happened along the way. We see the confidence that somebody has now. We don't see the courage that it took for them to overcome all of the small or large obstacles to build that confidence that they now display. I also think comparison can actually stop us from taking action. And this is something that, if you've been listening to earlier episodes, you'll know that I've been reflecting on a lot recently since I started my master's course, especially. I knew from coaching that actions build confidence. You have to take the action, the courage, the confidence that follows. But I am somebody who needs accountability. I am someone who used to wait for what seemed like the right time, a time when I felt like I was suitably qualified or had enough experience, or I felt more ready, or I felt confident enough. And sometimes we can convince ourselves that we shouldn't begin doing something until we are better or until we are ready. And I wonder if you have ever told yourself that you can't do something because somebody else is already doing it, or because there's people out there who are better than you at that thing, or whether you've ever said to yourself, well, what's the point? And so you never start. You never do the thing that you dream of doing, or you stop before you've really begun. You don't give yourself enough time to really sink your teeth in and to develop your confidence and to develop the skills that will enable you to really start to grow and for that thing that you want to do to really take off. And so comparison can become an excuse for us. It can become a reason to stay where we are because where we are is safe. But if every person who created something meaningful had waited until they were the best at that thing, then very little would actually exist, because every author starts with a blank page and every artist starts with a blank canvas, and every entrepreneur started with an idea and then they grew it into something bigger. Every speaker stood on stage for the very first time once. And every podcaster had to record episode 1, even if it absolutely filled them with dread and fear. So sometimes comparison can even lead us to have feelings of envy or jealousy. And the life coach Martha Beck often talks about how envy can sometimes act as a compass, not something to feel ashamed of, but something to actually be curious about. It might be that what we're reacting to isn't the person, so we're not envious or jealous of the person, but of the actual possibility that they represent. The fact that that person has given themselves permission, they have shown their courage, they have chosen to build a life that they dreamt of, and now it's coming true, they're making it happen. So you might question, if you are feeling envy or jealousy, is it because they are showing you the things that you want? Are they showing you that these things that you desire to have are possible? Are they possibly showing you that you have to face your fears, you have to face your worries, you have to face your anxieties, and you have to show up and take the action and be courageous and go after what it is that you really want? And so if you're feeling this way, you might start to ask yourself, what is this comparison trying to tell me? If I do find myself comparing myself and what I'm working on and who I am to other people, what is the deeper meaning underneath this? What am I trying to learn from this comparison? So you might have heard last week's episode with world-renowned artist Sarah Hardacre. Some people, if they are perhaps emerging artists or have been artists for a long time, might have felt maybe even slightly envious of Sarah's success, wondering when their time would come and how they could achieve those results as an artist. But one thing that I think really struck me about Sarah's story and the way she lives is her willingness to trust her own creative direction. Sarah's work doesn't exist because she spent years trying to replicate what everybody else was doing. It exists because she explored questions and ideas that genuinely mattered to her. And I think that's really true of most people that we probably admire. They have conviction, they know what they want, and importantly, they know why it matters to them. The how of how they're going to do the thing will often come later. And often the thing that makes their work powerful is that it is uniquely their own, because it stems from their why, from their hearts, from their experiences, and from what really matters to them. Perhaps this is another reminder that our goal isn't to be somebody else, but to become more fully ourselves. So how do we stop comparison becoming a trap? Well, the first step is simply noticing comparison. Notice the trigger. Who were you looking at? What were you thinking about? And what story immediately started running through your mind? The second step is to come back to your own values. Instead of thinking about what they are doing, try to reflect on what matters to you. Remember, your path is your path. It needs to be your path to be meaningful to you. The third step is to turn comparison into curiosity. So instead of wondering why you feel so behind or why you're not there yet, ask yourself instead what you can learn from the person, from their experiences, from their journey, how they got to where they are now, and how that can help you, but not define your actions. So you're looking for the learning from their success. And finally, and perhaps most importantly, I think, is to keep evidence of your success. We are so remarkably good at forgetting how far we have come. We don't often look back over the weeks or the months or the years of hard work and effort that we have put in to get to the point where we are now. We sometimes choose not to think about the feelings, the thoughts, the confidence that we used to have and how they have shifted and grown and evolved over time and how far we have come. We sometimes still focus on the distance left to travel instead. We look at the gap between our current self and our ideal self, this gap which we never seem to close down. Instead, we could look at the huge distance that we have covered already, how far we have come and how much we've grown as a person. This is the lesson that I am trying to hold on to as I prepare for my first women's retreat in November. There will always be bigger events, better known speakers, larger audiences, more polished marketing, people who are further ahead than I am. But none of those things change why I am creating the retreat or the experience that I want those who join me to have. I am creating the retreat because I believe women deserve the time and the space to reflect and reconnect with themselves and to think intentionally about what comes next for them. And when I come back to that purpose, my why, the feelings that guide my North Star, any comparison to other people, it kind of starts to fade away, because instead I want to learn from others who are already doing the thing to ensure that I can provide the best experience that I possibly can. So it seems to me that comparison becomes dangerous when it pulls us away from ourselves, but it can become useful when it helps us to understand ourselves and our why more deeply. Before we finish today, I would like to leave you with a simple reflection exercise. If you wish to, please draw 3 columns on a piece of paper. In the first column, write, who or what am I comparing myself to? In the second column, you can write, how does this comparison make me feel? And in the third column, what is this comparison teaching me about what I want, value, or need? So I'd like you to give yourself some time and to be really honest here, and then sit with your answers. It might be that comparison is actually pointing you towards something you haven't fully acknowledged yet. And that's where I will leave you today. Not with the idea that we should never compare ourselves to anybody else, but with the reminder that somebody else's journey is not evidence that you're behind, ever. Instead, it can be your evidence that you are both walking, but on different paths. Your job is not to keep up with everybody else or to be like them. Your job is to stay connected to your own direction, to your own why, to trust your own timing, and to keep taking the next step that is right for you, to keep showing up, to keep trusting that your path is unique and your journey is too. Thank you so much for listening to The Purposeful Shift and for allowing me to be a small part of your day today. If this episode resonated with you, I would love to hear your thoughts over on Instagram. You can also find more details about the women's retreat in November that I've mentioned over on Instagram, or you can message me there if you have any questions at all that you would like to ask. And if you haven't already, please follow or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so you don't miss future episodes. Until next week, I am encouraging you to stay in your own lane and to keep moving forward in the direction that feels true to you. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you soon.